Hi folks, this is Tim Beltley here. I am going to talk in video blog 2 is who is your family? Initially, as a child, my family was my grandparents, my parents, my sisters, which are both older than myself, and my eldest brother. My parents are gone, my grandparents are gone. We don't have a lot of extended family. I have a couple cousins that I'm in contact with. Even though my grandfather had 14 siblings, in his family, there's only about 7 of us left in the Beltley clan. But my real family, aside from my sisters and my brother, my real family are the people that I met growing up. One of them is a good friend of mine, Roger, and his wife Janet. Roger actually was one of my school teachers in middle school, and we'd become friends over the years. And we're still friends. When I go home to Pennsylvania, I go and stay at his place with his wife and now his grandchildren. And another friend of mine, Jim Cherry, that I met as a Bible study leader as a teenager. And most of my friends that I consider family, I met through church when I was a teenager. And though it's been going on 25, 30 years now, I'm still attached to these people in some way, in some form or another. And with the internet, of course, that makes it even easier now that we're all spread out around the country as well. But Pennsylvania is my home base, and that's where a lot of these people that are friends that are like family live. Other question, explain what primary socialization is and how it applies to your own development. Well, primary socialization is you learning the things that you do from babyhood into being a young child, speech patterns, the ways of doing things. I said in my last blog, my family's German, so that the short fuse is something that I learned when I was little. I saw it my father, I saw it my grandfather, I saw it my brother. But also at that time, I grew up in the late 60s and early 70s, so the people that surrounded me were hippies and free love kind of people. And that's how I associated life when I was younger. We had a family of hippies that lived down the street from us that had a gaggle of children, and they would put a big peace sign out in Christmas lights on the front of their house at Christmas time, which I thought was kind of cool. And that's where my influences came from. I mean, I lived in the suburbs, I lived in Pennsylvania. I remember 1969 in the summertime. It was, everything smelled earthy to me then. And that was when we first moved to our new house in Pennsylvania, and it really had an effect. I remember that summer especially because I was put in kindergarten for the first time, or nursery school, and that's when I started to make friends with other people outside of my immediate family, which was interesting. Number 3, the text talks about the myths of the traditional family. What was the family like 50 years ago? How is family life different from that it was for the parents or grandparents? Well, again, our immediate family disintegrated relatively early in my life, and I chose to find other alternative family members. I mean, the gentlemen I talked about from Bible study, are really the fathers in my life, and their wives are the mothers as well. And that's who I've turned to over the years for guidance and counseling and comfort. And how has it changed in the last 50 years? Greatly. Again, my grandparents came here and they had children, and they worked very hard to make sure that their life was better than what they had. And my parents did the same thing as well. Traditional family, though, it's the first time I think I met a non-traditional family. It was a friend of mine, John, and his sister Heather, and their parents had been divorced, and they were living in an apartment not far from where our school was. And that whole area there in Pennsylvania all of a sudden became a haven for single moms. And there was a lot of kids and a lot of single moms that suddenly went to our school. And that was the first time that I saw non-traditional families. But then again, on TV, we had the Brady Bunch. We had 2 families of widower and a widow getting married with kids already. And big families were still in. Big families were still the norm in the late 60s and 70s. We had, again, the hippies that lived down the street I think they had about 11 kids. And even my friend Pete, they've got 17 children. So that's family. And how does popular culture present the family? Well, again, in my lifetime, it went from being like the Brady Bunch, where you had two non-traditional families moving in together, and then divorced parents, aside from widows and widowers marrying. You saw that on TV. You saw single dads, like on Portrait of Eddie's Father, a single dad and his son making their way through the world. Then you had a show like Julia, where they had a single black mother and her son, who was a nurse, making their way through the world. And then Mary Tyler Moore, a single young lady making her way through the world. And that's what I grew up on, and that's where my perceptions have been for a very long time. Now, in the last 15 years, in the last 10 years, in the last 5 years, the traditional family has gone on to be same-sex marriages with adoptive children. One of my coworkers and his husband just adopted their son, and he's 5 years old. So it's different now. It's very different. And even back in the 70s, though, with different religious backgrounds, I've met a lot of people that were Jewish that married into non-Jewish families and such. So, but the TV back then, they very vaguely showed non-traditional families. But what they did show did have an impact on me. And I don't watch TV now, so I really don't know what's going on in the world. And that's about it. Thanks, guys. Bye.